It started as a typical day. I had plans to work late, so my wife, Sarah, didn't expect me home until well after dinner. But around noon, I got an unexpected call from my boss. He was letting everyone off early as a thank you for completing a big project ahead of schedule. I was thrilled. I could finally surprise Sarah by coming home early, maybe pick up her favorite takeout and spend a relaxing evening together. In hindsight, that plan feels like a cruel joke. When I pulled into the driveway, everything seemed normal. The house was quiet, calm. I didn't think much of it as I opened the door, eager to see her reaction to my little surprise. But as I walked down the hall, I heard voices coming from our bedroom, hushed and close. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to shake off the strange feeling that washed over me, telling myself I was being paranoid. But as I got closer, the voices became clearer. I could hear Sarah's voice, low and intimate, and then, a man's voice. My blood ran cold. A million thoughts raced through my head. Maybe it was innocent, maybe she had a friend over, but deep down, I already knew the truth. I pushed open the bedroom door, and there they were, completely entangled in each other. Sarah's eyes met mine, wide with shock and guilt, as the reality of what I'd walked in on crashed over me. The man scrambled, trying to cover himself, muttering apologies, but I barely registered his presence. My focus was solely on Sarah, the woman I'd shared my life with, who had promised me loyalty and love. For a moment, there was only silence. I felt like I was outside my own body, watching this unfold as if it were happening to someone else. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd trusted, seemed to crumble in an instant. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah broke the silence. It's not what it looks like," she stammered, hastily pulling a blanket around herself. Her face was flushed, and she looked anywhere but at me, as if avoiding my gaze could somehow lessen the impact of what I'd just witnessed. I couldn't believe she'd go with such a cliché. "Not what it looks like," I repeated, my voice colder than I expected. "Sarah, I just caught you in our bed, with another man. What else could it possibly be?" The man, who looked just as shocked as I felt, grabbed his clothes and muttered something to Sarah before rushing out of the room, clearly desperate to escape the scene. I didn't even spare him a second glance. He was just a stranger, someone who'd intruded into my life, but the betrayal felt personal because of her. She was the one I trusted, the one I'd shared my heart and home with. As soon as he was gone, Sarah started to sob, her hands trembling as she tried to reach for me. "Dan, please, let me explain. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen." I took a step back, avoiding her touch, my mind reeling. "How long has this been going on, Sarah?" My voice was barely above a whisper, but she flinched as if I'd shouted. She hesitated, and in that moment, I knew the answer. She'd been lying for longer than she was willing to admit, and this wasn't some one-time mistake. "A few months," she finally whispered, her voice thick with shame. "But it doesn't mean anything, I swear. It's you I love, Dan. You're my husband. He was just a distraction." I laughed bitterly, feeling a sharp, empty ache in my chest. "A distraction? You call this a distraction? You've been lying to my face for months. While I was out working, planning a future with you, you were here, doing this. Please, Dan," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I made a horrible mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I'll do anything to fix this. Just give me a chance." But her words felt hollow, and I couldn't stop the feeling that the woman standing before me was a stranger. The betrayal cut deeper with every word that left her mouth. The woman I thought I knew, who had been my confidant, my partner in every sense, was now begging me to believe her, but her pleas only twisted the knife further. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You didn't just cheat, Sarah. You shattered every bit of trust we had. You turned our marriage into a lie. She shook her head, her hands reaching out to me again. It wasn't a lie, Dan. I love you. I don't even know why I did this. I felt disconnected, like something was missing, and he filled that space for a while. Her voice broke as she tried to explain herself, but her reasons felt like excuses, empty justifications for something so brutally selfish. Something was missing. I echoed, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. And instead of talking to me, you chose him. You chose sneaking around, lying, instead of trying to work things out with me. How am I supposed to believe you love me when you were willing to throw it all away for some thrill? Her face crumpled, guilt and shame etched into every line. I know. I should have come to you. I was selfish. I was stupid. But please, Dan, don't throw everything away because of one mistake. We've been through so much together. My mind was spinning. One mistake. How could she even call it that? This wasn't just a slip-up, it was a calculated betrayal, one she'd been hiding for months, lying to my face every day while I poured my heart into a future with her. I don't even know who you are anymore, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The woman I married would never have done this. I trusted you with everything, and you decided I wasn't enough. The reality of my words seemed to hit her, and she broke down, sinking to the floor, sobbing into her hands. Please, Dan, she choked out between sobs. Please give me a chance to make it right. I'll go to counseling, I'll cut off all contact with him, anything you need. Just, don't give up on us. I felt my resolve faltering, my anger softening just slightly at the sight of her broken down, but the weight of her betrayal held me back. Seeing Sarah like this, vulnerable, pleading, stirred something in me. Part of me wanted to reach out, to forgive, to somehow find a way back to the life we'd built together. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Every time I looked at her, I saw her with him, the lies she'd told, the months she'd hidden this from me. Sarah, I began slowly, choosing my words carefully, you say you'll do anything to fix this, but how can I trust that? You hid this from me for months. What am I supposed to believe now? She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, desperation etched into her face. I know I don't deserve your trust right now, Dan. But please. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove myself to you. I know I messed up. I know I destroyed us. But I need you to know it was never about you. I just lost myself somewhere along the way. Lost yourself? I repeated, my anger bubbling up again. And you think this is how you find yourself? By tearing down everything we built together? She nodded, struggling to find her words. I don't have any excuse that will make this okay, Dan. I don't even understand it fully myself. All I know is that I love you, and I want to fix this. I can't imagine my life without you. Her words rang hollow, though. If you couldn't imagine life without me, then why risk it all? I asked, frustration and heartbreak lacing my voice. Why not come to me first? Why not work through whatever you felt was missing? She couldn't answer. She simply sat there, crying, her silence speaking louder than anything she'd said. Her choice hadn't been to try to fix things with me, it had been to look elsewhere, to take the easy way out. She hadn't given me the chance to be there for her, to address whatever issues she'd felt in our marriage. I can't just forgive this, Sarah, I said finally, each word a struggle. It's not that simple. You've broken something, and I don't know if it can be repaired. She sobbed harder, clutching her knees, clearly realizing that her pleas weren't working, that I wasn't going to simply brush this under the rug. Please, just think about it. Don't make a decision now. Let me prove to you that I can change, that we can still have the life we planned. Her words lingered in the air, and I turned, needing to escape the pain radiating from both of us. I walked out of the room, leaving her alone, unsure if I'd ever be able to find the strength to look at her the same way again. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to go through the motions, work, errands, basic tasks, but everything felt wrong, like I was living someone else's life. Every time I came home, Sarah was there, waiting, her eyes filled with hope that today I'd forgive her, that today I'd tell her we could work things out. But I couldn't give her that. She suggested counseling, begged me to join her in rebuilding the trust she'd destroyed. I agreed, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I was floating, unable to decide if I wanted to fight for what we once had or let it all go. Our first session was tense. The counselor asked Sarah to explain why she'd done what she did, and her answer was as evasive as before. I was lost, she said, her voice shaking. I needed something to feel alive again, to break out of the routine. Why couldn't you turn to me for that? I asked, trying to understand the logic. You say you love me, that you want a life with me, but instead of talking to me, you turn to someone else. She looked down, tears in her eyes, unable to answer. The counselor asked her to dig deeper, to explain why she'd jeopardize her marriage instead of confronting whatever was missing in her life. But her answers kept circling back to vague explanations, like a broken record. I was selfish, she admitted. I wanted an escape, but I didn't want to lose you, Dan. Sitting there, listening to her, I felt both sadness and frustration. I wanted her to say something that would make this easier, something that would justify the betrayal. But the more she talked, the more I realized she didn't truly understand the depth of the damage she'd caused. She was sorry, yes, but sorry for getting caught, sorry for hurting me, not truly sorry for the choices she'd made. Over the next few sessions, I tried to express my pain, to make her understand just how deeply she'd wounded me. The counselor guided us, helping us communicate, but it felt like trying to rebuild a house on a crumbling foundation. Sarah wanted to move forward, to bury the past, but for me, the betrayal lingered in every conversation, every attempt at reconciliation. One night, after another exhausting counseling session, I found myself sitting alone, staring at the wedding photo on the wall. I could barely recognize the couple smiling back at me, two people who believed in forever, who trusted each other without question. Now, I felt like I was looking at strangers, like that life had been someone else's, and the marriage I was trying to salvage was little more than an echo of something that had already died. The days after that realization were painful but clarifying. I couldn't deny that I still loved Sarah, that some part of me wanted to believe we could heal and rebuild. But the reality was harsher, every attempt to move forward felt forced, and each counseling session only seemed to remind me of what we'd lost. I'd look at her, at the woman I'd once trusted more than anyone, and all I could see was the betrayal. One evening, after another long day of going through the motions, Sarah asked me to sit with her. She seemed different, quieter, almost defeated, like she knew what was coming. Dan, I know I've been asking a lot of you, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. And I know I can't expect you to just move on from what I did. But I want you to know I'll keep fighting for us, even if it takes the rest of my life. I looked at her, searching for the right words. Sarah, I said, my voice thick with emotion, I know you're sorry. And I believe you want to make things right. But I don't think I can ever trust you the way I used to. Every time I see you, I see him. I see the lies. It's like a scar I can't ignore, no matter how hard I try. She wiped away a tear, nodding as if she already knew. I understand. I wish things could be different. So do I replied, barely holding myself together. But sometimes, love isn't enough to fix what's broken. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with everything we couldn't say. After a while, I stood up, feeling the weight of our marriage, our history, pressing down on me. I think we need time apart, I said, surprising even myself. Maybe it's the only way we'll find out if there's anything left to save. Sarah didn't argue. She simply nodded, her face etched with pain and regret. If that's what you need, then, okay. That night, I packed a bag and left, not knowing where I was headed or what the future would hold. I just knew that I needed distance, a chance to find myself outside of the betrayal, outside of the broken trust and shattered promises. As I drove away, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and relief, knowing that, for the first time in months, I was finally choosing a path that felt true to me. The weeks that followed were challenging. I missed her, missed the life we'd once shared, but as time passed, I found strength I didn't know I had. I began reconnecting with old friends, pursuing hobbies I'd long neglected, and slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding my life. Eventually, the pain dulled, replaced by a quiet resilience. I still didn't know what the future would hold for Sarah and me, but I knew one thing: I was no longer defined by her choices. I was free to create my own path, one step at a time, finally moving forward.